Hello, everybody. I'm Susan Heaton-Wright, and I'm the founder of SuperStar Communicator. My business enables and empowers everybody to make more impact in all business meetings or all business communication. So it enables everybody to speak with clarity, confidence, credibility, and impact in all business conversations, from meetings, one-to-one discussions, through to public speaking, pitching, presenting. And I would include online conversations such as podcast guest opportunities and live streams, something like this. Now, often I have guests with me, but I do like to have some individual sessions where I'm sharing some content based on my knowledge and expertise. And today I wanted to talk about being a podcast guest. Now, if you are watching online, you will see that there is a link through to a podcast guest ebook that we have created. Also, there are ways that you can work with us to work on being a great podcast guest. And I will put a link through where you can book a 1 hour session virtually with us, and we can work very hard on some of the things that I'm going to cover today. I have been podcasting for nearly 9 years, so I was very much ahead of the crowd and the noise, and it has been great. It has been one of those things that has raised my profile, my visibility, demonstrating my expertise. But also, I've had the great opportunity to interview some fantastic guests and increase my knowledge, which is all a really good thing. And this is the point. When you have guests on, you want them to provide really interesting content for your listeners so that they will continue listening to your podcast. It's a no-brainer. And I am really, really pleased to hear that many marketeers are saying to their clients, get on podcasts as a guest, because it's a great way to demonstrate your credibility, to share some content, raise visibility in the brand. Hurrah! I think that that's a really, really good thing. But I'm going to share with you some things that will mean that you will be of interest to podcasters, to people like me. However, one of the reasons why I decided to come on today and to discuss being a good podcast guest is that recently I saw a post from a small business where they were promoting podcast guesting, a particular program that they have, and that they would guarantee that there would be 5-figure sales. Actually, in the post, it went from 5 figures to 6 figures. Hey, but 1 0 doesn't make a difference, does it? However, it did concern me. Of course, I don't know the nature of the course, but this particular small company often promote being an author to raise your profile, or other things, sell from the stage. And alarm bells went up, because absolutely, in theory, you could sell 5 figures from being on podcasts as a guest. However, you've got to get everything in place from a marketing perspective and the customer journey to buy from you. And it is only the first stage of the whole process of selling. So, yeah, absolutely, there's a possibility that you could have 5 or 6 figure sales as a result of being on a podcast, but there will be other things as well. It is very likely. And I would say that you should never sell from a podcast. Being a podcast guest, you should be providing really good content. So I've got some tips here that I will share with you to make sure that you are a really good podcast guest. I'm sure that you have either watched on the television guests on chat shows, or you've listened to podcasts, or you've listened on the radio. And even if somebody has got an event to share and sell, or they have a book to sell, they will not be spending the entire time doing a hard sell. And let me tell you that podcasters want to have really good content, because their listeners will switch off and they won't listen to another podcast again if it is a hard sell in an interview. And guess what? Podcasters, they have the ultimate decision from this. They might not use your interview if you are literally selling, or they will edit that out. Guess what? I've done both of those. And any podcaster will agree with you that there is a certain section right at the end where you could share a promotion or an event or a lead magnet, top tips, or that sort of thing. So that is that's the feature of that. So don't worry, you're not going on and not having the opportunity to promote something, but it has to be done within the parameters of the podcast. All right. So I've got 3 top tips. Podcasts are like fireside chats. That's one of the buzzwords now within the world of events and speaking. Instead of, quite often now, speeches are much shorter, and there is a Q&A, or alternatively, the host of an event will sit with an expert and ask lots of questions. This is a virtual version of this. So you need to think about what you might be able to share with your audience. So it might be that you have some experience that you are able to share with the audience. You might have 3 top tips. So recently I was on a fantastic podcast, which is all about listening. And I was able to share some tips about listening, which is part of communication, with the audience, and provide a top tips list that people could subscribe to. That is a really, really good way of approaching it. As a guest, you agree with the host on a topic. So when there is an agreement of a date and the time that you're going to appear on a podcast, see if you can have an opportunity to discuss what it might be that you are going to talk about. In my case, I will have people 30 minutes before the live stream. So it's a live stream first, and then we make it into a podcast. And in that time, we will discuss in real time about what that will be that we discuss. And I come up with some questions beforehand. We agree those to prepare the person. It might be that you've got a really, really good idea for something that you could include in a podcast that the podcaster does not listen to. However, be respectful for the podcaster, because they are the host and they know their audience. When we watch or listen to those sorts of things, we want to get as much information as possible, because everybody is really, really busy. And if you are going into a long, complicated story that doesn't have some nuggets or calls to action all the way through, you are going to lose your audience. I have to say again that I was at an event 10 days ago, and there were 2 of those speakers that had a very good story, but it rambled on, and we were all getting a little bit frisky, thinking, oh, where's this going to end? And there was no nugget or inspiration for the audience. So really think about that. If necessary, keep everything short and sweet. And if the podcaster wants more information, they will ask you. All right. Now then, another thing is that there has been a trend in the last couple of years of some trainers giving podcasters training on how to expand their market and how to monetize a podcast. You need to watch out as a podcast guest. If there is a contract that comes from a podcaster, read through it carefully. Remember that podcasts are evergreen. They are out there forever. You might not want to have your IP or particular things that you share with that everybody can hear forever. So watch that. And also another thing is that for some of these monetization programs, there is the idea that after a podcast has been made, that it could be packaged and the podcaster could package it into a product that, and they will make money from that. You need to double check those things because you don't want your IP getting lost within their own company IP. Another thing is making the content into books. You might be quite happy to contribute to a book with some of the tips that you are sharing. However, you might not. Again, ask for a contract for them, and if there's anything that you're unhappy about, go back to them. But I've got something even better. One of my business friends called Sarah Fox is a lawyer. She's absolutely brilliant, and she has written a contract for podcast guests to give podcasters, which protects the guest's IP. If you would like a copy, she has very kindly said that you can contact her directly to request this. And if you make a small contribution to a charity, she will send you a copy, which is very generous of her. Her email is sarah at 500 words, the numerals, 500 words .co.uk, and I will put some information about that after this stream so that, or in the podcast notes, so that you can contact her directly. This is a really, really good way of you protecting your IP. Or it might be that you only want the information sent out for a year and that podcast to be cancelled. But that's a really, really good thing to do. So I've got, here are my 3 top tips, as well as all of that information so far. Number 1, I get loads and loads of people contacting me to be a podcast guest. Quite often they are not via the podcast guests themselves, but through an agency, a PR company, and they're basically pitching. They will be sending to their client, oh, we've pitched 500 podcasts, and they're randomly sending them out. I could share some hilarious stories with you about those, including being copied in to a pitch to 30 other podcasters, where we were all told that it's the most amazing podcast and they've got somebody wonderful for you. They've not done the research. It's not really it's not really showing much respect to the podcaster when you can see all of the other podcasters there in the same email, and quite clearly they've not listened. An alternative is some of the pitches are, oh, we loved your podcast episode about, and it was the last podcast, and then they pitch. So again, it's pretty transparent, and they are going for a number game. If you are interested in being on a podcast, do some research. It's unlikely that I will have people with respect who do exactly what I do on a podcast, because ultimately this is about SuperStar Communicator and us raising our credibility. So be wary of that. Really think about what you could add to a podcast. Look at some of the other topics that a podcaster is doing, and also listen to them so that you are get used to the style of that podcast. Really think in your pitch about added value, whether it is that you've got some specific experience, that you could give a checklist for people, that you could give them a really good idea for the future. Obviously it depends on the topic of the podcast. I would recommend that you go for a few podcasts rather than loads of podcasts, going for that number game that some PR companies go for. Go for quality where it's more likely that you are going to be interviewed. So number two, agree with the podcaster what the topic is going to be about. Now, there are various topics that I will go on a podcast for, and I will give those as examples, and it might be that a podcaster will send you information about the sorts of questions that they ask, or alternatively, they will have a booking form, and then you will complete it. So they will have some idea about the sorts of topics that you will cover, or the sorts of questions you would like to be asked. They might also ask about your an offer that you might have, or an ebook or something like that. And if you give the URL, then it means that they've got the information there already. So have that engagement with the podcaster. It reassures them, but it also reassures you. And finally, I mentioned about a lead magnet. Consider an invaluable offer or lead magnet. So it could be that you have a checklist or an ebook or a series of videos. But do remember that podcasts, by their very nature, are evergreen. In other words, they are out on the internet forever unless you specifically ask the podcaster to remove it after a period of time. So if you've got a specific offer that is for a certain period of time, that is not going to work. So really, really consider that. So a few things there that I've been able to share with you. I hope that you have found this of value. Remember, you can contact me at any time to discuss the sorts of training and coaching that we offer as part of our speaker training for individuals or teams. It might be that some of your team members would be ideal to be podcast guests. There are some things that I would be able to assist you with. There are a number of business owners I have worked with on this specific topic. And what I'm going to do is, underneath this, I will add the information about Sarah Fox, and the lovely offer that she has to provide you with a podcast guest agreement, the ebook, the podcast guest ebook with 10 top tips to be a great podcast guest, and also information on our online one-to-one training that we're able to do for podcast guesting. Thank you so much for listening. And as I say, if you've got any questions, don't worry. Please reach out to me. Thank you very much for listening. Bye-bye.